This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, it's John Blake from the SportsDay Rangers podcast for this week. Due to scheduling conflicts, Evan and I recorded this week's episode on Tuesday morning. Since the recording, there's been some Rangers news. Corey Seager has gone on the injured list for the third time this season. This trip is for a back injury. Rangers have also designated pitcher Chris Paddock for assignment. And with that, we hope you enjoy this week's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
And I'm Evan Grant.
And since we talked to you last, the Rangers' up-and-down season continues. The road trip goes on, 4-game sweep in Toronto, and the Rangers opened in very impressive fashion with a win in Cleveland on Monday night to run their winning streak to 5, back in first place, and getting good performances from people that just keep signing off the waiver wires.
Yeah, most recently it was Chris Paddock on Monday night, and Cam Cauley making his major league debut. But at the same point in time, John, the Rangers are dealing with yet more injuries. Wyatt Langford back on the DL, or the IL as we call it these days. Brandon Nimmo is dealing with a banged up shoulder, and the pitching depth is still being tested.
And the American League, Evan, is just so mediocre. 5 teams with a winning record in the league, and the Rangers look like they'll be in this, and it'll be interesting decisions to come at the end of July.
Yes, John, I would prefer to use Rob Manfred's words, not mediocrity so much as competitive balance. There was a lot of competitive balance. It's almost as if this is what Major League Baseball wanted, was competitive balance, and we have that. But after we break everything down today, we're going to get to talk to one of the most colorful managers in the Rangers' colorful manager history. It's a group of pretty colorful managers, all things considered. Bobby Valentine. Bobby played 10 years in the big leagues, was a superstar talent coming out of USC. And then he had a 16-year managerial career that started in Arlington from 1985 to 1992 and included a World Series appearance later with the New York Mets.
Yeah, and Bobby was really the first man. Doug Rader was here when I got here, but he was fired in May of the first year in '85, and so Bobby was really my first extended manager here, and it was a fun ride. It was an interesting, fun ride to say the least. But then with the 4th of July tomorrow, I love talking about presidents. That's kind of my passion. But we're going to talk about the 4th of July and some little Ranger events and what happened on the 4th in Rangers history, and we may even compare some names of Rangers with the signers of the Declaration of Independence.
And listen, folks, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you can reach out to each of us on X with any Rangers questions or comments. I'm at Evan_P_Grant, and as always, he is at Ranger Blake. If you want to help us grow the show, please rate us favorably if you would like. That would really make us feel good. But subscribe, whether you like us or don't, and share this podcast with your friends. And if you really don't like the podcast, share it with your enemies too.
Bottom of the ninth, bases loaded. Here comes Jimmy Dale from Baker Brothers Plumbing, AC, and Electrical.
Thanks, Chuck. When your home pitches curveballs, Baker Brothers knocks it out of the park.
Home run, Baker Brothers. Incredible.
As the official home service partner of your Texas Rangers, we're offering $300 off a tank or tankless water heater.
Another winning call. Visit callbakernow.com or dial 214-342-1171 today.
Baker Brothers.
Great service.
Well, speaking of enemies, have you made any on this road trip?
No, I mean, when you've won 6 of 8, it's hard to really piss a lot of people off. So everything has gone well on the road trip, and the Rangers got a break from me in Toronto. Sean was there. I was back home watching in disbelief as they continued to roll off win after win. And John, look, I mean, the thing for me about that sweep in Toronto is you went all out to win those first 2 games, which you absolutely had to do. And you you somewhat burned the bullpen in trying to lock away those first 2 games, and that was what you had to get out of Toronto with. And I thought going into the weekend, there was no chance they're winning a bullpen game and then having a game that Rocker may have an opener in front of him with no back end guys. And then when you factor in that on Saturday you wake up and Wyatt Langford's out of the lineup, I'm like, okay.
And you're facing Dylan Cease.
Yeah,
You know,
you're leaving with a split. And for the Rangers to win all 4 games there and do it the way they did, and then do it the way they did in Cleveland on Monday night, was really said something to me about this ball club and a kind of a and it's easy to look this way when you've won 5 in a row, but it certainly looks like they are willing to do what it takes to win games. And that's what guys said to me on Monday night, from Skip Schumacher to Brandon Nimmo, just talking about the idea of putting winning the game as the single focus of the day.
well, let's talk about the Rangers. One thing that's come up here lately, the Rangers are scoring first. They're getting leads, which they weren't doing at the beginning of the season. Is that important? I mean, is it important to be able to score first and get the momentum?
Look, I haven't updated my stat in about a week, but the Rangers were at least 25-2, if not better, when they score first and eventually get to 4 runs in a game. So yeah, there's something to be said for that. I think that the way the lineup is set up right now, and God bless Jock Peterson and what he's doing, he's really given the top of the lineup the kind of look it needs. He's not a base stealer or anything like that, but he gets on base. His 11-pitch home run to lead off the game in Toronto the other night was just, textbook work. And I think it has really set a good tone. Now, Jock was out of the lineup on Monday night.
But you had Justin Foscue against a left-hander come in and
Justin Foscue, and I talked to him about this on Monday night. I mean, the kid, he's a really earnest kid. He's got a great personality. He's an earnest kid, and I know he's felt beaten down a little bit in the past, but he feels like a weapon. He knows that he can hit left-handed pitching, and he feels like the Rangers are deploying him as a weapon, and he's really seizing on that.
Well, what about Cameron Colley? Yesterday, I mean, the roster moves keep coming, first of the week before the Cleveland series. And Cameron Colley, the latest one, his versatility and speed. What does Skip Schumacher have in mind for him going forward?
Well, listen, it's very clear whether you listen to Skip during spring or you listen to him yesterday, he's a big Cam Colley fan. And maybe he sees a small, gritty infielder who was kind of like him as, kind of his spirit animal. But he's a big fan of Cam Colley, and I think he's going to put him to work. He's going to play he'll play some infield right now, but he also is going to get a shot in the outfield. He's going to play some center field against left-handed pitching, and he might have played it, last night. But the Rangers felt like they needed with Peterson out for a day and with Nimmo out for a day, they needed a defense that they could get in center field from Evan Carter. And as it turned out, Evan Carter had 2 hits against left-handers on Monday night. So different things are coming up, but I do think that the first game really allowed Cam Colley to show what he does well. He made an error early in the game on what could have been a double play, and that's the kind of thing that can haunt a young kid. But the Rangers feel like he's a really poised kid and that he was able to turn the page. And then what ends up happening, the third time he faces Parker Messick, he gets a changeup, and he turns on it and laces it into the corner, which allows him to show off his exceptional speed. And he ends up with a triple, making him only the 4th Ranger. Here's a trivia question for you, John. The 4th Ranger to ever have his first major league hit as a triple. Can you name any of the other guys?
Yes. Pete O'Brien was one. There's one fairly recent. Was it Profar? No. He had a home run.
Close. Close. Same era. Hanser Alberto. I don't think we're going to get Hanser.
Right.
And then, of course, Then, of course, the guy who knows everything is better in his day and age,
Jeff Fry. Jeff Fry was the other one, and we won't get into your interactions with Jeff Fry today. That's probably for another podcast. But let's look at the fifth starter spot and Tyler Alexander. Again, the heroes here over the last week are so numerous, but he opens twice, and then Quantrell was the load pitcher the first time. Chris Paddock last night. Do you think one of those guys, Paddock, will take that other starting spot? Probably.
I don't know. I mean, after watching Cal, and maybe it was pitching back in Toronto in his hometown, whatever. But he gave the Rangers 4 innings. He had given them 3 innings in Miami. I feel like that right now for me, Cal giving 4 shutout innings in Toronto. Probably he earns the next opportunity, but we'll see where Skip Schumacher decides to go from here. The Rangers also like what Cal gives them as a long man in the bullpen. So I think he can. I think he's got a couple of days here where he can play around with things and figure out how he wants to use guys. And if he needs to use Cal as a long man here in the next couple of days, then maybe the decision is made for him.
He's also got a couple off days coming up,
yes.
Thursday and Monday. So I assume that could have some impact on how the rotation looks here in the next week to 10 days.
The Rangers built in this extra off day for the core of the rotation by bringing Paddock in, and I don't think the Rangers are going to shorten anybody up with that off day. I think they're going to honor him as much as they possibly can. I do think it's an interesting situation for Skip Schumacher on how he wants to deploy the 5th guy right now, but I think that this is what you have to have in a season if things are going to go right. You have to have some unexpected contributors, and for as you said, for Tyler to open 2 games, close 2 games on this road trip, for Cal to pitch well in two games on this road trip, and for Paddock to basically come in, at the last minute and contribute, and then you add in what Cameron Cawley did on the at the plate last night or Monday night. Those are some unsung heroes right there, and that's what you need to have an extended winning streak.
Well, let's talk about All-Star teams will be announced tomorrow on Saturday, I believe, right? Saturday this year, yes. So what are your
July 4th?
July 4th, yep. And what are your predictions for the Rangers here?
My predictions are that the ratings for the All-Star selection show are probably not going to be great.
Because of the World Cup?
Well, because it's July 4th also. I'm not sure how many people are going to be inside waiting for the All-Star selection.
We all know this is about television, so.
But I think
that's why they've got every game on Peacock on Sunday, I think, but same thing.
I think it's unfortunate that obviously Ezekiel Duran was denied the opportunity to get the starter's job because Ernie Clement was the overall lead.
Wrong position, yep. Ernie Clement, amazing.
But listen, Duran has cooled off a little bit. I hope he's still in consideration for a reserves job. He's got to finish, I guess, second in the player. First or second in the player. He's got to finish first or second in the player voting.
Yep.
I just don't know how there can be an all-star team without Jacob Latz on it.
Again, he's got to finish in the top 3 in relief pitchers. So
I don't see.
Really, the way he's pitched, you wouldn't think the players are pretty shrewd on this. I think year after year they prove they do a really good job at picking the all-star team. So I agree with you. I think he's got a really good chance.
The players select, I believe, 3 relievers. And there are some guys with some sexier strikeout numbers and some higher velocity, but I think it's pretty clear cut that Louis Varland, Cade Smith, and Jake Latz are the 3 guys who have been the most valuable relievers in the American League this year. And listen, on this road trip already, we've seen Latz save 2 games in Toronto where Varland, gave up a key run. We saw Latz close out a game with 2 innings in Cleveland, and Cade Smith wasn't able to get into the game. Jake is as valuable as any reliever in the American League right now.
Well, we'll see what happens. That's tomorrow, and the versatility of the Rangers right now, and having a versatile team, both in the position players and basically the pitching staff. The bullpen is very versatile right now, and that seems to be with all these injuries. And what's the latest on Langford, Ed?
Yeah, he's going to be out until after the All-Star break, and it's going to be another season here where Wyatt Langford's going to play less than 140 games. And, he's had 3 full seasons in the big leagues, and he's not played in 140 games yet. You get the same reputation that Josh Young had to deal with, that he's injury prone. So it's a hamstring strain. It's a fairly significant hamstring strain. And we'll go from there. What I took out of this is, I had been an advocate, along with several people in the organization, for if you were going to platoon Evan Carter in center field, that I thought Wyatt, based off of the way he'd performed the last 2 years, deserved to not be shuttled between left and center. And I had advocated for him to play center. Well, when Carter gets hurt, and they make some moves, and you end up playing Wyatt in center field every day, and he gets hot, and he's hitting and running 5 days in, and he strains that hamstring. Was the hamstring fatigued at all from the center field work? I don't know, but I think this is what some other folks in the Rangers organization had kind of harped on, is his body may not be suited to play center field long term, and that's why they want him in a corner, and I can't argue with that at this point.
Let's move on, and our guest this afternoon on this week's podcast, we're going back 40-plus years in Rangers history. Bobby Valentine managed the club from 1985 until 1992. He's second in club history in wins and games managed. Managed a lot of the young players that would have a lot of success with the Rangers, and then he went on to manage the Mets and the Red Sox, and won a Japan series overseas, and we'll talk to Bobby next. We're happy to have as our guest this week on Sports Day Rangers, a person that's familiar to a lot of Ranger fans, Bobby Valentine. Little background about Bobby, which all-time range from Rippewam High School in Stamford, Connecticut. Got a scholarship at USC, was a first-round pick of the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1969. Played 10 years in the major leagues. Was on the bench with Tom Grieve, which we'll get into a little bit, with the Mets for a while, and then was the Rangers manager, was hired in May of 1985, manager through July of 1992, still second all-time on the Rangers list behind Ron Washington with 1,186 games and 581 wins. And we'll talk a lot about that magical 1986 season when all the young players came together. Bobby went on to manage 16 seasons, almost 1,200 wins, later managing the Mets and the Red Sox, and also very successful stint overseas as the manager of the Chiba Lotai Marines, won the Japan Cup in 2005, later worked for ESPN, athletic director at Sacred Heart University, and now lives on the West Coast, does some television out there for the Angels, and was congratulations, just named to the New York Mets Hall of Fame. So quite a resume, Bobby. It's great to see you.
Hey, John, great being with you and Evan. And, nothing like talking about the old times. And I hope I can remember them all because they were spectacular.
Well, going back 40 years, and Evan, we're going to talk a little bit about your relationship with Tom Grieve. But you come into the situation in Texas. You're 35 years old. The team is 9-23. The franchise is, because I had gotten there the previous November, and I knew how moribund this place was, and it really needed a spark. And that's what you came in and gave us right away, even though 1985 didn't go so well. But what were your first ambitions when you came in to manage the Rangers in 1985?
Wow. Once I got there, John, I think my first ambition was just to get the word out that there was a baseball team in town, that, we weren't the Rangers weren't on horseback and riding around with big hats on. That they were actually a baseball team, and Arlington was a wonderful community that was stuck there in between Fort Worth and Dallas, and we needed identity, and I think I was trying to get it out there.
And you jumped right in. That was one of the things, Evan, about Bobby was, I mean, we haven't never had a manager that jumped in and got into the community, opened two of his restaurants down there, the Bobby Valentine Sports Cafes in Arlington, and that was your objective to try. And it was really helpful as a PR guy to have that energy and everything, and to tell people, look, we've got a chance here. Ranger baseball is real.
Yeah, that's what it was basically all about, Evan. Getting the word out. I moved right there. I lived there year round. Not many managers wanted to do that at the time. They'd go fishing or hunting or playing golf during the winter and then check back in spring training. But I decided I was all in, and I was glad that I had someone like John Blake and Tom Grieve around to kind of protect me from myself.
Well, listen, Bobby, in not getting to cover you, everything I've heard about your time in Texas was always from somebody else's perspective, mostly from Tom Grieve's. And that is the thing for me, that to hear Tom talk about the relationship with you, there are two questions I've got. One is, that time with the Mets had to be really significant for him. What was your memories of your time together with him in the Mets, and how you guys kind of forged that bond would be the first thing.
Wow, yeah, it was the Mets, 1978, 77. I came over to the Mets from the San Diego Padres on Black Friday, they call it, the day they traded Tom Seaver to the Reds and traded Dave Kingman to the Padres, and I was in that Kingman deal. So life was miserable in New York, and Joe Torre was a player manager trying to figure out if he was going to hit or if he was going to make out a lineup card. And Tom Grieve and I basically sat the bench together and second guessed everything that Joe did, and had a lot of fun doing it.
So when you get here, the thing that sticks out for me is to hear Tag talk about it. Y'all had a partnership. It was never superior an employee. It was always a partnership from his perspective. And a lot of times he said he basically deferred to you. And I look at baseball today and I wonder, can that exist? Can that exist anywhere? Can that partnership work and exist anymore in Major League Baseball?
Well, the dynamic is similar to some of the places around. I mean, Tom was a really smart guy, is a really smart guy. University of Michigan, he was much more intelligent than I was. I was knee deep into baseball intellect, into the baseball culture. And Tom, being a number one draft choice, he was too, but he went on to, learn to sell tickets, learn to what an organization was all about. And I was from the neck down in the trenches of the baseball culture, and Tom was from the neck up into the organization culture, and he built that organization as well as anyone could have ever done it under the circumstances that he was given, and having to have me hanging around with him for 7 years. That was quite the anchor that he had to pull through that swamp that we were kind of in, the baseball swamp. So, when you talk about Tom Grieve, there's no one like him. There's no one who had the intellect. There's no one who had the empathy and caring for people. There's just no one like him. So could that exist again today? First, you'd have to recreate a Tom Grieve, and that would be really hard to do.
Well, that's a great point, right? Because nobody comes up in the way that like a Roland Heeman or the way that Tom came up, where they worked on every side, not just baseball operations, but they worked on other sides of the business structure before they moved into that seat. And you don't see that anymore. It's either, straight from an analyst role into managing baseball ops, or straight from the field now back into managing baseball ops.
Yeah, exactly. He built it. He understood it. His people talk about communication and lines of communication. Tag was able to communicate with everyone in the organization, from the guy who was at the gate collecting the ticket, to the person who sold the ticket, to the person who was trying to make people buy the ticket. He was one of a kind. And understand this too. Analytics. When I got there, Craig Wright was on my staff. He was a sabermetrician that Tom brought in to deal with the numbers. 1985, we're talking about, to give me essays on things that I didn't understand. The value of a stolen base, the walk and the value, the trajectory of players, and all of those. He brought in Tom House. He said to me, "Hey, this guy's a little weird, but I want you to interview him to be a coach." Tom House was the number one pitching, throwing person that baseball has ever had. And his think tank has developed into what it is today, to be the go-to guy for guys in the NFL who throw a football as well as guys who throw a baseball. He said to me, "Hey, if you need someone to organize your spring training, I've had this guy in the organization named Tom Robson. He's be really good at organizing your spring training." Yeah. Well, along with Tom House, Tom Robson developed the hitting philosophy with biomechanics, with computer analyzation in the 80s, folks, that they're using today. So Tom Grieve brought in Tom House and gave me Tom Robson,
who you had forever with the Mets, and
yeah,
you everywhere you went.
Tom Robson was with me in the Mets. He came with me to Japan.
Right.
He restructured the entire hitting philosophy of the Japanese hitting culture. Think about that. We had to go up against the press and everyone else, including the baseball philosophy in Japan, about the swing not being down, but actually being up. We were doing that when people were saying we were nuts, So, yeah, Tom Grieve put all that together. Without Tom Grieve giving me Tom House, and without him recommending Tom Robson, my baseball intellect would have been stuck in the mud. Instead, the IP that I took out of that has evolved into what we know today as the new way of playing baseball.
Right.
Also, I need to just throw this in, which is also now becoming the old way to play baseball, because everybody's now manufacturing runs again all of a sudden. Everything in this game that's new is old, so it's amazing.
Yeah, except for the swing and the throw, because those things that are related to the actual physicality of a person, the biomechanics that are dictated by physics, not dictated by theory, those are new, but they're new old because we were doing it in the late 80s. And the old way of playing the game was what I had, right? Of creating runs, of getting advantages on the field, as well as in the clubhouse before the game. And using statistics at that time we had stuff on the walls of the dugout that people would laugh at. Yeah. And they would say, "Oh, these guys are looking
and
at us."
They did laugh at us.
Right,
so,
they laughed
exactly.
at us, John.
Yes,
Ted was a
did.
mad scientist back then.
Yes, they did.
Now it's, everybody's got that same chart.
Yeah. Couple of years I want to just touch on a little bit, because the first one is probably one of my most favorite, and this is my 48th year in baseball, was 1986. And 1985, it was kind of a clean out the veterans and make some trades, and we played pretty well in September when some of the young pitchers came up. But then in 1986, we had gone out. Tom made a great trade to get Scott Fletcher and Edwin Correa from the White Sox, and we went with the Rangers went with young pitching, Bobby Witt, and Mitch Williams and guys like that.
Jose
What do
Guzman.
you remember? And Rangers go out and go 87-75, finish second. They're in the race. Bring up a young 19-year-old named Ruben Sierra in May. And but as I said, that was an unexpected season and one of the more fun seasons I've ever been around. What do you remember about all that?
Wow. I remember that it was an everyday adventure at being like at Disneyland. It was spectacular in seeing young players come up. And again, Tom Grieve opened that floodgate to allow players who didn't get their 1,500 at-bats in the minor leagues to get to the big leagues. Oddibe McDowell out of college. And
one had no at-bats in the minor leagues. Your left fielder.
He had 0 at-bats. And how about that? How creative was Tom Grieve to get a number 1 draft choice from the Montreal Expos, who wasn't going to sign with the Expos, and trade for him before he was even signed? Did it so creatively that Major League Baseball put in a rule that you can never do it again, right?
Yeah,
Called the Incavilla rule. And you know, we were in spring training, John. You say, what do you remember? Pompano Beach. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
We're moving out of there. We tell them we're moving out of there, but we want to use their field. And they said, okay, then you take care of the field.
Right.
And Tom and I used to rake the dirt.
No tarp.
Right? Move the tarp. We put up the screen on the batting cage the day before spring training started, and then someone stole the netting.
That's
to go
right.
fishing with. Huh? And Incavilla is taking batting practice with a throng of reporters standing around, and he hits a ball that goes through the old wood of the fence in center field.
Great moment. Great thing to publicize.
Bobby, don't worry. John's already done a whole segment on the ball going through the fence on the podcast.
It happened, though. It happened, Evan. Yeah. And Oddibe. And then, you know what came out of that, basically, though, is the next year with all those young pitchers, they got hurt.
Right.
Edwin Correa, what a spectacular. Remember, he pitched at Yankee Stadium, a 2-hit shutout as like a 19-year-old kid.
It was,
could hardly speak English, and then somehow he breaks his arm while pitching. Nothing other than a freak of his physicality and his bone structure. But that kind of started our owner, Eddie Childs, on a little bit of a rampage of, hey, if you don't keep your pitchers healthy, you're going to have to get a new job. And so I remember Tom saying, we have to come up with a plan to bring to Eddie Childs to tell him we know how to keep our pitchers healthy. We went to a guy named Jim Andrews, who was unknown at the time, an orthopedic surgeon down in Alabama. And we said, please tell us how to keep them healthy. And he said, well, why don't you do a pitch count? How about that for a revolutionary idea? And we had Paul Richards in the front office, who was a spectacular person and a spectacular baseball man, along with Bobby Bragan. And they're in the front office, and Paul Richards comes in and says to me, well, when I was with Baltimore, we had a pitch limit on our minor league pitchers. They could only throw 15 pitches an inning. And we went, oh, that's what Dr. Andrews said. And we brought that plan to Eddie Childs. Lo and behold, 15 pitches an inning now is standard operational procedure in every major league dugout, except for the fact that 15 pitches an inning, that's like 105 and 7. And I could do the math, and Tom made sure I could do the math, so we kept track of that. Most of the managers after that couldn't do the math, so they just said, okay, it's 100 pitches, and then we'll take a guy out. And that's kind of a story for another day. But we came up with that. Tom Grieve came up with that concept that is standard operational procedure today also.
I had never heard the story about Richards having that kind of limit on his pitchers in the minor leagues. That's amazing that it goes that far back. And, nobody in baseball really applied it until you guys did in the 80s at the major league level.
Well, we had some very smart people. We had a very small front office. It was about 30 people, and Bobby, we didn't have an advanced scout. Bobby did satellite scouting. He got a satellite dish, and that's how we did advanced scouting. We had one pro scout, John Young, and again, like Bobby says, if we hadn't had all those pitching injuries, who knows what would have happened with that staff.
Yeah, that was a core of a great pitching staff with all of those guys. Bobby, one thing I wanted to ask you about is, you got in the late 80s and early 90s, you got those first looks at Ruben and at Juan and at Pudge. And I'm gonna put the gun to your head a little bit here. Like, which one of those guys stood out to you as the biggest talent immediately when you saw them at such a young age?
Ruben was the biggest talent. Ruben could do it all. And let me just mention this to you also. Tom hired Omar Minaya, or promoted Omar Minaya, to be an international scout. People that have international scouts at the time, and then an international director. And there was a pipeline that was established from the Dominican and Puerto Rico that most organizations weren't even considering at the time. So, yeah, we had that going, and Ruben was spectacular. Understand, he could run, he could switch it, he could throw, he could play the outfield. He wore number 21 in Roberto Clementi's name, and then he did not win the MVP.
1989,
yep. Won the MVP.
Yep. And that changed it all, yep.
And, right, John?
Yes.
And I remember sitting in my new office in Port Charlotte, and Ruben was late for spring training. And we knew he was upset he didn't win the MVP. And I'm looking out the window at 7 a.m, and then he was walking down, strutting down the walkway, John, right? He had all these necklaces on, and I'm looking, and I couldn't recognize who the person was, because he had gained about 30 pounds, and it was 30 pounds of muscle. And as his walk came in, I said, "Who are you?" And from there was a different story of Ruben Sierra. But up until that time, he was the Lamborghini in the parking lot of Fords and Chevys.
Yeah. One more for me, because we could talk all day.
Yeah.
Just fast forwarding to 1988 winter, 1989. And again, Rangers, this is, again, great job by the front office. Go out and get Julio Franco and Rafael Palmeiro to restart the offense. But then the cherry on top was signing a 42-year-old pitcher named Nolan Ryan, who'd been your teammate in Anaheim. I believe you lived with him, and you guys lived together for a while. What was that all like? And then that beginning of '89 was just special. 17-5 in April.
Yeah, no, it was surreal. Mike Stone, who led the charge, had the idea during those winter meetings that we could get Nolan Ryan. Everybody else thought it was a pipe dream, but Mike kept saying, no, he's a treasure of Texas treasure, and we've got to keep him in Texas. And we went into that suite, and I went into, interestingly enough, into the bedroom with Ruth Ryan, while Mike Stone and Tom Grieve talked to Dick, what was the agent's
Dick Moss. Dick Moss.
Dick Moss, right? Marvin Miller's old lawyer. And they asked if we could come in last. They weren't going to negotiate with him, but could we come in last after they get all the other offers on the table? And the only thing that Ruthie wanted to know from me is whether or not the kids would be allowed in the clubhouse, because at the time in baseball, again, young kids weren't allowed in the clubhouse. That was the place of tobacco chewing, tobacco smoking, and cursing. So I said, "You want them in there, Ruthie? If you guys sign here, they'll be in the clubhouse." And lo and behold, they're running organizations now. And Ruthie has a smile on her face, I'm sure. But the way that season started off, Nolan wasn't supposed to be our ace pitcher. He was supposed to be our marquee pitcher. He was going to be limited to 75 pitches because they thought he had a tear in his elbow and maybe wouldn't be able to complete a game. And I took him out in one of those games because I was worried about his elbow. I think he might have had a no-hitter, John. When I took him out, right? Yeah. And then the rest is history. I mean, he just took the bull by the horns, and he led that community into a place that we were trying to get them. But finally, because Nolan appeared, the community kind of created that love affair that's still there for the Texas Rangers. Nolan and that signing was it was surreal. I can't believe it happened. And I think the line that Mike used, we don't have the same money that everybody else has, but we have a team in Texas, and you're a Texas treasure. We want to keep you there. And next thing I know, he was wearing a uniform of the Texas Rangers. It was spectacular.
Hey, Bobby, last thing for me is, listen, when I got to Dallas in '97, obviously there was the Times Herald was gone, but I kept hearing stories about how competitive the beat was in the '80s, and we had this weird relationship when I got here that the Star Telegram talked to Johnny Oates at one time and the Morning News at another, and it was different from anything I'd ever witnessed. What was it like dealing with such a competitive beat where the guys who were on this beat, Tim Kirkjian, Tracy Ringlesby, Jerry Fraley, all Hall of Famers now, and T.R. Sullivan should be in the Hall of Fame at some point in time.
Randy Galloway, yeah.
And Randy Galloway. So, yeah, firing off opinions left and right. So what was it like to try and have to navigate that with three papers on a daily basis, really going after the team on a deep level?
Well, Evan, it was the three papers, and it was also the kind of the start of sports radio. All right. Yeah. All of a sudden, not only was Randy voicing his very public opinion and very Randy Galloway opinion every day, but fans were calling in, and you had fans voicing their opinion. So what was going on? That ESPN was doing the 24-hour sports cycle. So that made these writers need a story other than the game. It used to be just the game that they would write about for the next day. But now that people wake up at 6 a.m, turn on the TV, they'd already have the game. So you'd have to have another story. And these reporters that you mentioned were best in breed. Every one of them was cutting edge, sharp, find the story, exploit the story, hold on to the story, and give the story to the community. You know, when I got to New York, everyone warned me about the press. I didn't need warning. I was prepared like no one else has ever been prepared because of the community of sports writers and sports coverage that I left in Texas. People don't give that group the credit that they deserve. I've told Tim Kirkjian multiple times, that's a documentary. And if not a doc, it's even a 3-part TV series. If you just recreate that environment of those guys, and with a big mouth like me, that they would throw the hook out and hook me up, and John would go, "Oh no, Bobby, you didn't say that, did you? Oh, what are we going to do now, Bobby?" And Tag coming in and saying, "Okay, we'll just put that fire out tomorrow. Let's win a ball game today." Yeah. Right? It was spectacular. And Evan, it was not anywhere else like that. That transition time from 24-hour ESPN to the three newspapers competing on a daily basis, and then talk radio to boot, that time in sports in our country evolved in a spectacular way and started, I believe, there in Texas.
Yeah, that's it's still amazing. I didn't get gray hair back then, but we lived through it and came out to tell on the other side. Well, we could go on forever on different things, and but we appreciate you taking the time to kind of talk a little bit about those years, because it was we had good years, we had bad years. The thing people don't remember is we had a winning record. Bobby was the manager of the Rangers in 6 complete seasons. We had a winning record in 4 of those. And the other 2, it was injuries. I mean, 87, injuries just crushed us. And like you were talking about earlier, Evan, I mean, the offensive players we had, it was unbelievable. We haven't even, Palmeiro and Franco and all of these guys. It was an amazing team we had.
And the problem was the Oakland A's.
Right,
We were in their division, and there was no wild card.
No, that was
and
right.
we gave up games at the end of the season. The last 3 weeks of the season, we played as many young guys as possible, knowing we had no chance for a wild card. A lot of those games were losses, but they were developing for the next year. Hey, I got to say one other thing, and I know it's time's out. When I got there, John Blake met me, and he never says this, but this is what happened. Well, what number are you going to wear? And they gave me number 35. That's how old I was when I first got there. And he said, do you have a middle name? And I said, yeah, it's John. He said, does anybody ever call you Robert John or RJ or BJ? Or I said, what do you mean? Because up until then, I was Bob Valentine. I always signed my name Bob Valentine. My wife called me Bob. My folks called me Bob. But John says, I don't think Bob's going to play down here in Texas. We need something else. How about Bobby? And I said, okay, let's go with Bobby. And from that day on, my identity has been Bobby Valentine instead of Bob Valentine. And I always credit or discredit John for that.
Well, you've won that name very well for a lot of years, and done a lot of great things in baseball, and we appreciate the time today. It's been great catching up. Thanks, Bobby.
So.
Well, on the Archives in Arlington, I thought it would be very appropriate, since it is America's 250th birthday tomorrow, and I know the Rangers have been a big part of America's 4th of July for so many people over the years. But I will say 4th of July for the Rangers in Arlington Stadium and the ballpark in Arlington, especially in Arlington Stadium, was one of our few sellouts of the year, because we had 4th of July fireworks when we were outside, Evan. It was the biggest fireworks show in Arlington for a lot of years. And we always were home on the 4th of July. Now that the team has moved to Globe Life Field, the club hasn't been home that much because we can't shoot off fireworks anymore. I think they will be home tomorrow against the Detroit Tigers. And twice the club did not play on the 4th of July in 54 seasons, 1981 during a players' strike, and of course 2020 when there was the pandemic. But we're going to look at just a couple of Ranger highlights on July 4th. The team entering tomorrow, 26-29 overall. Lost 4 of 5 and 9 of 11. But a couple of games over the years, and I wasn't at some of these, believe it or not. 1974, they lost to the Twins 3-1. Bert Blyleven threw a complete Game 1 hitter against them. That was a good one. In 1982, they beat the Athletics 11-4 with Larry Parrish driving in 7 runs, and he hit the first of 3 grand slams he would hit in a week-long span. A good one that I remember was 1988 against the Yankees, Evan. Charlie Huff threw 101 pitches in 2 2/3 innings. He gave up 8 runs on 3 hits, and he had 8 walks. But he did strike out 4 batters in the first inning, just the second time in Rangers history that has ever happened. So a typical Charlie Huff start.
I don't even know if that would qualify as typical for Charlie Huff, but
well, when he had a bad one, I mean,
wow. You know what, John, and I don't recall if I'm getting my salute to the military weekend and Memorial Day weekend and 4th of July mixed up. But, one of my favorite things was, and one of those games, maybe more than one, at the old ballpark in Arlington, you would do a military swearing in.
Yes,
Right.
Air Force. Usually we would do an Air Force swearing in, and we would have little planes.
That
That
was
would
the
come-
thing. It's little
I love the little planes.
men would drive out in little planes, and it was like little toy planes that they would drive out.
It was it was really good. It was like the Shriners in their little cars. I always liked that kind of those kind of pregame. A couple others here. Nolan in 1992. Nolan Ryan pitched 8 2 shutout innings against the Yankees in a 4-1 win. Danny Tartabull homered with 2 outs in the 9th to break up the shutout. Nolan threw 135 pitches in a complete game win, which few more than Charlie, but in a lot more innings. And a couple you probably remember. At Houston in 2004, Rangers homered 6 times to beat the Astros 18-3. Mark Teixeira homered from both sides of the plate, and a pinch hit grand slam for Hank Blaylock. So
I remember that one.
And you might remember this one, too. I don't know if you do. 2016 at Boston, we played a day game, if you remember, coming off a brutal series in Minnesota. It was the weekend where we wore the Blue Jackets and the red pants, Jeff Bannister's 4th of July ensemble. We lost that game 12-5. And an interesting fact is that both the starter, Nick Martinez, and a very short-lived reliever with the Rangers named Michael Roth each gave up 10 hits in that game to the Red Sox.
Well, it was fireworks on the 4th of July.
Yes, it was. And I've already asked you this trivia question, but the Rangers have used of the 1,150 players that have played in a game for the Rangers, and we're still waiting for Winston Santos to make his first appearance as of the taping of this. Only one was born on the 4th of July. Do you remember who I told you it was?
No, I do not. It was
All
some
right.
guy who played very briefly.
Right. It was a left-handed pitcher by the name of Zach Curtis,
Zach Curtis.
who pitched in 8 games for the Rangers in September of 2018. The only player ever, or manager or coach, to ever be born on the 4th of July. And interestingly enough, only one Hall of Famer has been born on the 4th of July, National Baseball, and that is Mickey Welch, born in 1859. So, and then the last thing I wanted to bring up was the Founding Fathers and signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, while the Declaration was adopted on July 4th, 1776, it actually wasn't signed until August 2nd. Of 1776, and 56 delegates from the 13 colonies signed it. Now, I went through, this is how much time I have these days, semi-retired. I went through and looked at the Rangers' all-time roster of last names and coincided it with guys who had signed the last names of guys that had signed the Declaration of Independence, and there were 33 of them. Would you care to name a few?
No. I assume that there was a Jefferson who has played for the Rangers at some point.
Jefferson.
All right. Well, there was a Mike Adams. I know Mike Adams played.
Yes. John Adams did sign the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
And Samuel Adams, too, before he
Yes, he
made
did.
beer.
Did Mel Hall ever play for the Rangers?
No.
Was there a Hall?
Yes.
Which
it was
Hall?
It was pitcher Drew Hall, who was in the Palmeiro trade in 1989 with the Cubs. Lyman Hall from Georgia.
Correct.
You probably remember Lyman Hall from your state, your home state.
Lyman Hall was a character in the movie 1776 who uttered a very important line in one of my favorite all-time movies. Was there a Sherman who ever played for the Rangers?
No.
A Chase?
Nope.
Hal Chase played for the Rangers?
No, he didn't. The most guys is 4 Rangers, and there are several names with 4. Clark, Abraham Clark signed it. You have Jermaine Clark, Mark Clark, Terry Clark, and of course, Will Clark, right?
Was there a Smith that signed the Declaration?
Yes, it was James Smith from Pennsylvania. Yep.
Okay.
We had 4 of those. We had the immortal Dan Smith, Keith Smith, Josh Smith, and Will Smith. And then also we have 4 Wilsons. James Wilson from Pennsylvania signed it, and you can name at least a couple of those. Wilson, who played for the Rangers.
I'm drawing a blank at the moment.
How about the
Bobby
pitcher of the
Wilson,
How about the pitcher of the year in 2010 and 11?
C.J. Wilson.
Along with Josh Wilson and Steve Wilson. So, but that's just kind of interesting to look at different names of guys that have played for the Rangers. And as we honor his 250th anniversary of our country tomorrow, I thought the 4th of July, and we'll see if the Rangers can pull off a win against the Tigers on Saturday. And they're not playing a night game tomorrow either, all right? I mean, it's a day game, isn't it?
That's
Because
correct.
we don't have to worry about fireworks.
Fernando Rodney never played for the Rangers, huh?
No, he did not.
That would be in honor of Caesar Rodney.
Right. Okay, so that will do it for this week's episode of Sports Day Rangers. I want to wish everybody a very happy Independence Day and hope you have fun celebrating our 250th anniversary. It's a big milestone in the country. In the 200th anniversary, I was a junior in college, if any of you care, in 1976, and I was actually a copy boy, Evan, at the Washington Post, and I was working that night, so I didn't even get to see the fireworks on the Potomac. You were a much littler lad, I believe.
I was 11. I was about to turn 11. Was living in South Florida at the time, and had made during that year had made a field trip with my school to to Cape Canaveral and the launch site there. And there we all got to inscribe our names on a piece of paper that was put into a time capsule that will be opened, I believe, on the 300th anniversary of the United States.
I have bad news for you. That time capsule was destroyed 2 days after you signed it, but that's okay. You can.
I'm planning to be back for number 300.
Okay.
It's a big gift.
But anyway, happy 4th to everybody, and thank you to Bobby Valentine, and we'll see you all next week.